The following podcast contains explicit language. Yes, and this is Gabe Coker, the producer, the host, and the victim of the ModState podcast for February 1st, 2017. With me is my managing editor, Jonathan DeViney. Jonathan.
Hi there.
And there is a reason why we have a pancake makeup-clad human, well, perhaps human, on my iPad right now that wrote this song that I used to enjoy when it was the theme song of Test Drive 5 on the Sega Dreamcast console that I love. But now I see the way this man looks. Why in the hot place is this guy on my iPad right now?
Well, I can't really answer.
It's not
why
funny.
he's on
It's not funny. It's not funny at all.
Well, I mean, why is he on your iPad, and why does he look that way in the video?
Now, but this was your suggestion that this should be the theme song to our podcast.
Well, okay,
and I love the song. I just admitted that I love when you suggested Cars as the theme song. I did not think of the Disney movie. I instantly knew the song you were talking about, and I thought it was a great idea. I love the song.
It's a cool song, and it kind of goes along with our whole Art Deco / retro future theme. I mean, if you look at the logo of ModState, you've got, yes, the Capitol Dome, but you've also got kind of a coin / timestamp deal that plays into that whole theme. And Gary Newman with that song, you know, he wrote it actually about he had nearly got into an altercation in traffic in London and how he felt secure once he got back in his car and slammed the door. But regardless, it just seemed to fit the overall theme. And of course, I'll be more than happy to deal with litigation if he cares enough about the podcast to talk to us. But either way, it felt like a song that fit, and yeah, he kind of had the whole. You can tell in the music video, which I know you've seen before, but you can tell he's got a little bit of a bit of artistic respect for David Bowie through the biggest form of respect, imitation. There's definitely a Bowie thing going on with the way
he wasn't. He what in the yes, you busted me out. I have seen the music video many times. It's on the actual game. On the Dreamcast.
It's a good video.
He doesn't have that much makeup on, as in the freaking photo on his YouTube video. What the hell?
Okay, well, the makeup thing, on that, he was, I believe the show was Top of the Pops. It's one of the British music shows that is no longer on the air, or it was defunct for a while at the very least. But Gary Newman was about to go on, and he was having a bad acne breakout time. And this is from his mouth, his words. That he was having some acne problems at the time, and so he said they slapped about an inch of makeup on me, and I looked kind of like the Joker I was about to go on, and he said it just stuck. People after the show, commented about his look, his style, and he said it was not this intentional thing, but because people liked it, even when his acne was gone, he just kept that going. And I guess that's smart. It's kind of like buying a successful restaurant, and not changing the name. Successful, so. Smart business.
All right, well, let's get the obvious out of the way before we begin the podcast. This is Black History Month.
We are fans of Gary Newman.
Yeah, absolutely. That was what I was coming to next. It's Black History Month. Should there be a White History Month? Get that done in about 15 seconds so we can move on to something that matters.
No, God almighty. I'm
you've wasted 3 seconds already. You got 12 left. Now you have 10.
History Month. I'm
timing this.
Of Dr. King. I'm a big admirer of Dr. King and Booker T. Washington, and I'm actually a supporter of the concept of Black Lives Matter. I don't like what all the followers have done with it, but that said, I am okay with an exclusive month devoted to Black History Month, and so I'm looking forward to it.
All right, well, I gave you an extra second and a half, so you're welcome. So, for both of the listeners to the ModState podcast today, here's an outline of what we're going to be dealing with on this 1st of February, Trump's inaugural. I'm going to be a little bit self-congratulatory in complimenting the Political Beast article that is top of the charts at ModState right now, which was an examination of the inaugural events in 3 parts. Oh, that's right. It's actually not top of the charts right now. Top of the charts at ModState is a letter to Donald Trump written by one of our contributors. Well, I'm going to pretend. I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to count to 10, and I'm going to pretend we're going to deal with the article anyway. And then, we normally do a rapid-fire round, as you know, Jonathan. This rapid-fire round is going to be an enormous challenge to you because it involves an attempt. I will so not be surprised if this podcast never gets posted to ModState. We have I'm gonna count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Not done yet. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 20. We have 27 cabinet secretaries. No, these are not czars. These are not one of the 85 czars appointed by President Obama. These are actual...
Right there, you just said it all in rattling off. In counting to 27, you just made my case for me on why the central government is too big. But do continue.
The rapid fire round is going to be only 27 of possibly the most important people who affect your daily life. These are cabinet secretaries. Now, they're not all called secretaries, okay? There are only like 12 of those. These were cabinet-level officials that are confirmed by the Senate that Obama has appointed. About half of them, as of today, February 1st, thanks to the Republican majority in the Senate, have been ushered through with some due diligence, but mostly due haste. And some haven't. But we're going to examine each of them. But it's going to have to be rapid fire because we're going to try to keep. It does have to be because we're going to try to keep this podcast to about 40 minutes. All right. It's about the amount of patience that both of our listeners have. The distance between their ass and their eyeballs and their ears is about the same distance as yours and mine, which isn't far. So we're going to follow that up with a couple of, don't feel sorry for them.
I don't want to know that.
We're going to follow this up with a couple of clips. When I say a couple, I actually mean 2, not 27. Clips from Sean Spicer, real quick, the press secretary for Trump, him lashing out at the press in his first press conference, and from Kellyanne Conway talking about the Trump administration's approach toward the press. Well, I want to deal with this. I want to deal with this because you and I both thought Kellyanne Conway was probably the most qualified candidate for press secretary, but also because you and I are sort of members of the press. So we need to talk about...
I mean, we are. We are. It's official, and whether or not she was the most qualified, the point is I definitely thought she was the most likely and the most deserving out of his core. He's somebody that feeds loyalty, for better or worse.
Well, we're going to finish with what we finish with traditionally, which is in mixed company. I brought what I think is a hell of a great conversation starter at a cocktail party. And if you don't have something that doesn't have anything to do with ModState this time, I'm going to crawl through my iPad into your...
I need something to do with ModState?
Into your abandoned basement room where you record your version, your end of the podcast, and I'll punch you squarely in the face. So, have something interesting.
Good luck crawling through cellars in New Orleans, because we don't have them for a reason. They'd be underwater, but please, go on.
I keep forgetting it. I'd have to crawl through, I'd have to crawl through the chimney. Because y'all do have chimneys, right?
We do, yes. But, I don't wish Honey Island Swamp on my worst enemy, so stay above ground, please.
All right, so to recap, we're going to go over my piece about the inaugural, which, as my boss, I hope you've read. We're going to run through the cabinet picks, which will take up the bulk of the podcast. We're going to do a couple of clips from Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway, and then we're going to do In Mixed Company, and I'm going to talk about this book. See it? This book? See it? This book right here? Oh, yeah, that's right. This is just an audio podcast. But anyway, it's a good book. It's important. It has to do with Trump. It has to do with the Supreme Court and stuff. All right.
Well, let's kick off the 27 Club already, shall we?
All right. So, the article. Did you actually read the article about the inaugural?
I did, actually. It's, I did have to take the editing on that one. Very little to be done, actually. It was, I thought, very, very thoughtful and pointed to a certain degree, but it wasn't towards any one group. It was just you were making some pointed observations about, well, I'll let you fill it in. You had 3 specific letter highlights.
All right, so the article was broken up into 3 pieces. The speech, the spectacle, the sputtering. The speech. I'm assuming that you've listened to it more than once.
Yes.
The emphasis.
I watched it live, but I've also listened to it again.
The emphasis was on, a few points, and I thought that was appropriate. Like most inaugurals, keep it simple and keep it pointed and keep it important. He constantly reminded us that this speech, this moment, this administration, my policies are about you. It's about you. America first, which I know is kind of the same, in the same vein. And then the third, that this is a change. Trade, ISIS, our approach to our enemy, our so-called enemies. This election
and I had to cancel my travel plans to Tehran for next summer. I'm heartbroken.
So, all right. So address the speech. Briefly. Again, most of the time, the major issues are what take up the bulk of our time, and the rapid fire round is just sort of a.
Quickly, because this is actually a fairly simple answer. You and I both talked about this to quite some extent before the actual speech, and you and I, as it turned out, were largely correct in that we said that he would not veer far from the script. He did veer from the populist message to an effective degree, in my opinion. I'm not commenting on do I think he was right. That's another conversation, okay? I'm commenting on, as President-elect and now President Trump, the speech. So there's a line of demarcation I want to make there. With that, I think it was an effective speech. He made a point of it, and they showed several prior presidents when he said this is what made it so effective. But he made a point of talking about things are not going to be the way they've been in the past. And we've seen that already, obviously, with a man who, for better or for worse, is trying to do what he promised he would do. But about the speech, it was simple, it was short. I can't verify this, maybe you can, but at least amongst the shortest inaugurals in our history. It had to be. And it was, I believe him very much. When he posted on Twitter that he was writing it himself, people mocked him. I believe it. Because if he didn't write that speech himself, and somebody was sitting right there with him using his exact wording that he used ad lib in the debates. It was very effective, and he was speaking to the vast majority of Americans who, whether or not they voted for him, do feel like the system has wronged them and has not served them. I think overall, very effective speech.
Well, Political Beast is going to use this opportunity to brag moderately.
You wrote a good article.
No, this is not about the article. This is about an answer to a question that you just answered. George Washington, in the book that I'm holding in my hand. No, this is not the book that I'm going to talk about in as my contribution to In Mixed Company. This is a book I just snatched off the shelf of my personal library while you were talking. And yes, I could hear you from across the screen. I was not ignoring you. This book is entitled The Inaugural Addresses of the Presidents, just so that our reader/listener knows. When I said in the article that we've read, that Political Beast has read every inaugural address ever, I didn't mean everyone since Hoover. We've only listened to everyone since Hoover.
I've read every one at least once, and I know you've read them multiple times.
Yes. Well, these pages that I hold are dog-eared. How many times that I've dealt through them? I don't know if the microphone is sensitive enough to pick up me thumbing through these pages.
Yes.
But George Washington's first in this book, which is, it looks like, it's about 8-point font, something like Times New Roman. His took up 3 pages. His second, interestingly enough, took up 9 pages.
Right, it was a lot longer.
John Adams took up 2 pages. And I'm not going to go through every president. I'm just going through the ones. I'm going to try to hit the ones that were short. James Madison was only 2 pages. And again, I'm not giving a number of words because I don't know exactly what that was.
But again, we can't verify this one way or the other. Interesting note, however, I will say at this point that thanks to Edwin Edwards, who was their congressman at the time, my father and his middle brother, Harry DeViney, were at the 68 inaugural President Nixon. It was about 25 degrees, but they were there for it, and I thought that was interesting to make that up.
William Henry Harrison, who died not long after giving his inaugural, he takes up 26 pages in the book.
My God.
Yes. Compared to
That's
2.
unnecessary.
Right, compared to 2. James Buchanan, the last president to not be involved in a civil war, took up 22 pages in this book.
You start to lose people when you go on for that long.
I need to fast forward so we don't lose our listeners. Teddy Roosevelt. In the only inaugural, people forget that even though he served for almost 2 entire...
Henry was elected the first go-round, so Teddy did
he
not
was only
give
elected
inaugural.
once, because he promised when he was inaugurated that he would only serve for 1 more term, because he served for 7 years. And he felt that was too close to 8. So he promised he would, and he said for many, many, many years, he said that was the greatest regret of his life. Which is interesting because Taft was actually, his vice president, was actually a really good president.
Yeah,
Teddy Roosevelt,
would think TR would have some bigger regrets than that, but I mean, to each their own.
Well, Teddy Roosevelt, his only inaugural, takes up 6 pages. Interestingly enough, Silent Cal, I'm looking right now through this. Silent Cal takes up 15 pages. Huh. So yes, just to throw this out there, more recent, Ford, 2 pages, Carter, 8 pages, Reagan's first 2 pages, Reagan's second 8 pages, and it only goes through Clinton. Bush took up 10, Clinton took up 8. So yeah, it's comparatively speaking, yeah, it's one of the shorter speeches. But let's get to the spectacle.
Yes.
Just this is complete and utter opinion, okay? But just between you, me, and the people listening, they've made fun of how few people physically showed up to the Trump inaugural, address.
Right.
When I say comparatively, I mean compared, of course, to our last president.
Obama.
Yeah. Do you think this is actually evidence of more popularity for Obama? You think it's more because people wanted to be present for the inauguration of the first black president? Do you think that it's because people are watching like as I was online and on television and on my phone all at the same time?
I think a big factor was, yes, people like me that watched online. I actually had it simultaneously online and on television so I could flow, but I think that was a part of it. However, I really do believe that it was all of the above. My sister Melanie has long put this into perspective. Let's say we lived in South Africa for 2.5 centuries, and we finally had elected a white president. And it was a democratic society the whole time. Let's forget the whole apartheid thing. Remove that for a second. I'm just using the ethnic numbers here. Yes, we would say, yes, we want a white president, and then everybody would want to hear what this person had to say. So 2008 was a special time, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go on it ad nauseum. But also, I must be honest here and say that I do think to a certain degree there was a bit more goodwill in 2008. A lot of that's been tainted now, not because of Trump or Obama, either one specifically, but it just has been. There's sort of a feeling of, well, maybe we can't. Now, whether that's correct or not, I'm not saying. Also, you have to remember his biggest supporters, not that Obama's supporters aren't poor people, any of them, but a lot of Trump's most fervent supporters, and he said this, were people from the Rust Belt who were dirt poor that lost their jobs. Well, how many of those people could drop everything and go to D.C. for the inaugural? Who's paying for that? So that's something to bear in mind here that I haven't heard said in the mainstream media. And again, I'm not saying that Obama's supporters are all wealthy, okay? I'm just pointing that out as something that wasn't pointed out, or I haven't heard pointed out anyway. But I think it's an all of the above type thing. I think there's a lot of negativity right now. It's not all Trump's fault, but that's just the reality.
All right, well, before we move on to the rapid fire round, which again normally takes up a very small part of the ModState podcast, but in this case is going to be the bulk of the ModState podcast.
We're going to move through it quickly now.
Let's hit on the sputtering. I'm sorry. Maybe it's not that important. Maybe it is that important. Maybe it's because it fell, right in the sweet spot of my political involvement in high school and my political awareness when Bob Dole was the Republican candidate for president, when I was starting to understand about people that fought in World War II and the sacrifice of that entire generation. Maybe it all came together for me. And to be honest, I haven't heard anyone else in the media address this. So maybe it's all completely and utterly in my head, and I'm an insane person. Maybe that's it.
Let's see, what is it?
The sputtering, the third part. The one part of that third part of my article that I want to address,
right,
is Trump was leaving the box after he spoke, gave his inaugural address. He was walking
Bob
out.
Dole was at the top in a wheelchair.
And stopped, came back, and shook hands with Bob Dole, hugged Elizabeth Dole, and spoke with them for, I don't know, about 20, 30 seconds. And then President Obama came up out of the box after President Trump, went straight, made a beeline to Bob and Elizabeth Dole, shook hands with Bob Dole, hugged Elizabeth Dole, then hugged Bob Dole. Next, President George W. Bush comes up. Oh, hey, Bob, hey, hugs him. They talk for a second about Bush's dad being in the hospital. And Bush said, hey, man, he's like, yeah, I spoke to your dad. He sounds really good. He said, oh, yeah, he's getting better. Like, Vice President Biden, stop, Bob. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Like, and this wasn't like a, hey, this is scripted. Hey, and this is something everybody's supposed to do now.
It was just there. I was watching. Yeah.
Right. You just caught that. You caught, like, literally the cameraman caught it.
It was just
because he had a microphone in his camera, and he just happened to catch what was going on around him. Right?
I'm glad they did.
And the only two people in that box that were important, quote unquote, were President and Mrs. Clinton. They did not stop. They didn't even look at Bob.
Well, I see where this is going. I'm going to stop you there because I don't want to take up too much time with this, but I will give you a short, and yes, it's personal, but an anecdote nonetheless. I actually had, and I've never told this story publicly before, and I probably won't tell it again, but I had the distinct privilege of, as a hospital corpsman while stationed my first 2 years in the Navy, I was at Walter Reed. After the merger between the Army Hospital on Georgia Avenue with the Navy Hospital on Wisconsin Avenue, I had the privilege of taking care of Senator Dole. And he had an irregular heartbeat or something. I don't remember. But he was there, and his persona, if I'm lying and dying, you walk in the room, and of course, meaning me, I addressed him formally whether I was in the Navy or not, but I called him Senator, and he said, well, it's just Bob. I said, well, Mr. Dole, and he goes, it's Bob, damn it. I said, well, all right, Bob. I see, so I took his blood pressure, his IV, and all this, and then he wanted to go out to the smoke cleaner, and the nurse said, well, he can't do that. I said, well, you go in there and tell him no. Because he was already up with his cane that he was going, and on our way out of the hospital, he informed me, and he infamously said this in the campaign trail against Clinton, but he informed me that smoking, the dangers of that were like the dangers of drinking milk. I had to tell him, hey, he's still there. But just a genuine guy, just an everyman. I mean, he would, in fact, he said something to this effect. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically he put his pants on the same way as everybody else, so he didn't want to be treated differently.
Yeah, I actually heard a story about Bob. And I don't want to get us distracted, but I have to say this. A story from an aide who was in the Democrat cloakroom, and there's some bill that was up. It wasn't even that big a deal. It wasn't that important, but they had invited Bob Dole over. One of the senators invited him over, to discuss it, and he was, bogged down with something, and so he's like, "Hey, if you don't mind, would you come over, and talk to me?" And it wasn't anything unusual to have Bob Dole in the Democrat cloakroom. It's not. I mean, this isn't a spy. He's not going to go like tell on you.
It's Bob Dole,
right? It's Bob Dole. And said Bob, and this aide that's a friend of mine. This aide said that Bob Dole walked in. First thing he did was he looked around the room and walked straight. Instead of asking an aide, like, hey, would you go get so-and-so? He immediately saw that the senator wasn't in the room. So he went immediately to this friend of mine. And not that it has anything to do with him being a friend of mine. Bob Dole doesn't even know I exist. But he went to this aide And he went up to the coffee machine. And you know Bob Dole only has the use of one hand.
Right.
That's why he keeps the pen in one hand all the time, because he can only use his left hand.
He got maimed in service to our country in World War II.
Right. So he goes to the coffee machine. He gets the cup, puts it in, and he acts like he's trying to, serve himself coffee. He turns to my friend and he said, "Would you mind helping me?" And it's like, the first thing this man does when he walks into a room where everyone's looking at him going, evil, bad, right wing,
right.
The first thing he does is he finds an aide. He goes to a coffee machine and he admits, "I'm nervous, I'm weak." He makes himself completely vulnerable.
That was his way. I mean, he has a way of disarming people. I'm not commenting on his politics. Bob, and I call him that because if he was here tonight, God bless him, he would say the same thing. Maybe that's an idea to ask him on here. But if he were, he would. I mean, he was quite emphatic with me. I mean, he liked me. I only took care of him one day that I recall. Might have been a second, but at least one. But that day, he was quite emphatic. He was to be called Bob. And here I am, a 26-year-old, never done anything. First year in the Navy, I'm going, I really don't feel comfortable with that, but he didn't care. He was Bob, kind of guy he is.
All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for being kind to me about my article. We've broken down the three parts.
That was a good article.
The speech, the spectacle, and the sputtering. And I'm thankful that you agree that the worst part of the sputtering, the worst part of the failure, if there was any in the inaugural process, was the treatment of Bob Dole. Although, as I say in my article, I'm sure if President and or Mrs. Clinton were listening to this right now, I am quite positive that it was
unintentional.
It was totally unintentional. I'm sure it was unintentional.
Maybe it was just a slip. It was a badly timed one. Okay, it looked bad PR-wise. But you know what? The sad thing is, let's say it was deliberate. You know how many people in our generation know who the hell that old man in the wheelchair was?
Exactly. That's what bothered.
So they can get away with that.
That's what bothered me the most, is how many people know who the hell that wheelchair-bound old geezer who can barely move one hand, much less two. Who the hell knows who that person is?
Right.
That's what bothered me the most. It was a visceral response.
Let's give them a grain of salt here. They probably did not notice. Okay, but my thing is, as politicians, you need to be more observant. But let's go ahead and say, if they knew they were, especially if they had realized who it was, they're on camera, the Clintons would have probably stopped. Okay, I think it was an oversight, but it's a really bad one because everybody else stopped.
All right, thank you for agreeing with me.
Was up there, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not, but whatever.
All right, so let's move. Let's move through. We're about 15, maybe 20 minutes behind where I thought we would be at this point.
Let's jump on into the 27 club.
And now we get into the 27 nominees for cabinet level positions. All right, Jonathan, you ready?
I think. I don't know.
I love your hesitation. I love your hesitation.
There's a lot of.
Let's to all of our listeners. We are now going to address the most important part of the federal government. And we're going to attempt to do it in about 10 minutes. It involves 27 people that may or may not. What the hell? They will definitely affect your life. If they don't affect your life, they'll affect somebody that is the boss of you, or someone that works for you, or someone who is, I don't know, a child of you, or someone who might want to attack you.
Gabriel.
I'm not talking to you, Jonathan.
But so, let's, I'm, My feelings are already hurt.
All right. Look, we have a very important interview coming up with the NAACP. So you warned me not to talk about minorities. So I'm not going to call you a homosexual. All right, I'm not going to do that. But you need to chill the heck out. All right. So, number one, state Rex Tillerson. Please, look, I know most of these people you don't even know. Please tell me you've done a little bit of research on this guy.
Yes. I all I'll say on this before we move on, because he may be a great Secretary of State. I do find this one highly ironic due to all the talk about Goldman Sachs, and that's a big part of his corporate background, if I'm not mistaken, and all the grief that Ted Cruz's wife got because she worked at Goldman Sachs and drained the swamp and all that. And here we have an executive from Goldman Sachs, but he may be great. But really, that's all we know about him as a public policy figure, or lack thereof to date. So maybe Trump has an eye for talent. I'm giving that. So.
All right, here's one that's a little closer to you. And by the way, for our listeners, remember, this is supposed to be the rapid fire round. It just so happens that in the rapid fire round this time, we're dealing with rapid fire questions for Jonathan that are a little bit more important than they normally are.
Right, we usually have 3. Now it's
now it's 27. Okay,
so we got 27 here. So.
All right, this one I'm gonna give you permission to do about 22 seconds on this one for obvious reasons. United States Marine Corps General James Mattis for Secretary of Defense.
I'm going to be quick. I love the comment from a leftist media source. Is this the sort of person? Yes, this is the absolute person that we want taking the job. And I'm glad that the Joint Houses of Congress granted him an exemption. Normally for our listeners, not enlisted, but as an officer, you must be out for 7 years before you can be Secretary of Defense. I'm glad they made this confirmation, because I will sleep a lot better at night. And I'm a little biased because this man was the prior commander of my unit, Victory Unit 17 in the Marine Corps, but you're going to see over time, this man is a patriot. He's never married, and he talks about having to move his huge library. He's a well-studied man. We're going to be happy with him in this job.
All right, well, we're going to do another one. John Kelly for Homeland Security.
I looked him up not too long ago, and I'm trying to remember what he was last associated with.
He was last associated. I'm about to embarrass the hell out of you, Jonathan. He was last associated with the United States Marine Corps. He's a retired general.
He was a former officer. I was looking at his picture earlier. Dang it. Well, anyway, no offense, Mr. Kelly. I sincerely apologize. But yes, he was actually. You just said it. But he's one of those people. He's well disciplined. You know this much. If you make it as a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. They're very well disciplined, and he will. If he can't personally take care of a task, he's going to find somebody that will. That's just in the cadre of their training. So I'm confident in it. Are you having as much trouble Wikipediaing these people as I am? I'm not. I'm sitting in the middle of the room holding my glass. I'm not cheating. I'm holding a glass of vodka and orange soda
for our listeners. I promise. I did all the research so that Jonathan wouldn't. John Kelly, someone who hasn't really spoken out much. Politically, hasn't declared himself a Republican or a Democrat, and actually didn't agree originally with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security as a cabinet position at all, which, in my opinion, is a lot like John Bolton being appointed to the United Nations, a person who had come out publicly saying we shouldn't even have a United Nations. Sometimes I think that's the best person for the job.
Honestly, I mean, kind of like having Rick Perry where he is, which I know I'm spoiling a later part, but, there's been a number of people that's happened to.
Okay, next. We got to go. Tea Party activist Mike Pompeo for CIA director.
Well, this is a special one I'm going to leave alone because I obviously, as you and I discussed before, have some issues with the Central Intelligence Agency. My hope is, rather, I don't get to craft goals, unfortunately, in public policy, but my hope is that since he's somewhat of a sectionalist, my hope is that he will help craft a policy where the CIA is allowed to do their job, doesn't get involved in foreign policy specifically, but we don't hamstring them with lawyers. And I think he's got the opportunity to accomplish that under the Trump administration.
Next, Steve Mnuchin. And I don't normally hear the N in Mnuchin. Mnuchin is spelled Mnuchin. I don't normally hear the N pronounced, so maybe
I was wondering if you were talking about the senator from West Virginia, but that's not the same person, so, right?
No, yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Right.
See,
you didn't know about the other cabinet secretary who was from the same branch of the military in which you served.
Right.
But I'm not making fun of you there. I'm simply pointing that out. But
Congress, right? He's a congressman.
Yeah, Steve. Mnuchin. Yes, he's a congressman. But
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Steve Mnuchin, I don't. To have a last name Mnuchin.
Yeah, let's leave that one alone, please, because I know where you and I can go with this.
To be named Mnuchin and be anointed Treasury Secretary and be from Goldman Sachs, you had to have inserted that in between the M and the U. You had to have inserted that like after you were born. You had to have done that on purpose.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
Jon Stewart is no longer at the Daily Show, so we're having to fill in here, all right? But Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, comes from Goldman Sachs. Hit that quick. Hit it. Quit it. Let's move on, because I promise I could piss, not only get pissed, I could piss all over this one.
That name, and we're not, dude, there's so much. I was a Marine for 2.5 years. I could do a lot with this.
Yes, okay.
Let's not.
All right, but let's take Steve himself out of this. Let's just say that a former partner at Goldman Sachs has been appointed and anointed as the new Treasury Secretary of the United States.
They know the bottom line. They're a very, whether you like them or not, they've been around and are such a topic because whether they're the grave robber type or not is irrelevant. They're successful, and if the bottom line is the bottom line, which at the Department of the Treasury it should be, who knows? I mean, we've had worse.
So, as I pull up his bio and his history of success and lack of success, I'm going to just ask you this, and I promise I'm not going to ambush you. Should we have the Too Big to Fail corporation representing us as the head of the portion of the government that regulates them?
Because I can rail against this, but again, I'm going to go back to one thing. I mean, it's not the only thing, but it is one thing that President Trump is good at, okay, is being an eye for talent. And unlike all the people protesting him before he was even sworn in, I'm going to give him a chance. So maybe he sees here something that I don't, that a lot of us don't.
So you're going with the I've been cheating the system for so long, I'm the one who knows how to fix the gaps because I'm the one that's been making the gaps.
You're kind of ambushing here, I will say, because I was about to say this. I've worked for some people before Now, I'm not going to mention names, so let's leave that alone. But I've worked for some, yes, legal businessmen before that I'm not terribly proud of things they've been involved in. Okay? This man could be completely bereft of knowledge of any of that.